Welcome to the Hustle or Bust podcast powered by Paverart. Our mission is simple: to dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, small business, and all the success, struggle, and challenges that need to be confronted in the pursuit of growth. We celebrate the entrepreneurial spirit, but perhaps most important, we want you to learn at least one idea that you can put into action immediately to make your investment in time worthwhile. Welcome, everyone, to a very special episode of our Hustle or Bust podcast. We refer to each program as being powered by Paverart. Hence, the reason for this one is pretty special. First, Paverart marked its 20th anniversary this past March. Second, this was our very first podcast in the new podcast studio. And finally, to celebrate this important occasion, Mark and I invited a very special guest to participate. One of the original partners who was instrumental in starting this business, Ken Bull. Ken is currently the COO of Five Below, probably the hottest retail business in the country. But before his journey with Five Below, Ken decided to tap his inner entrepreneurial spirit and start from scratch a new business with partner Mick Soroka and myself, manufacturing and marketing the line of products we now call Paverart. We think you'll really enjoy our conversational journey, which includes a little bit of history, lots of wisdom, and a few laughs along the way. We hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it. You know, we use the phrase, "you can't go home again," credited to the great writer Thomas Wolfe. Well, this episode just may prove him wrong. Join us as we welcome home my brother, Kenny Bull. Welcome. Thanks for coming to the podcast today.
No, it's great to be here.
I know it's tough to find a time, so.
No. It's fantastic to be here, and thanks for that tour. That
Absolutely.
was, to see where the business has gone is really pretty exciting.
And based on that, it's important for our audience to know and understand that Ken was one of the founding members with his partner, Mick Soroka, in this business, Paverart. Now, we don't typically talk about Paverart in very specific terms on this podcast. We're more general. We talk about work ethic, entrepreneurial spirit, small business startups, and things like that, and all that's entailed in getting involved with that. But the reason we have all of this information is because the background that we have, and a lot of that background comes from Paverart. Yeah. But today, it's very, we're more Paverart specific because of the fact that you're here, being one of the founding members of Paverart with Mick Soroka back in 2003. Although, I think you were approached in 2001.
Yes.
Do me a favor and do Mark a favor too. Can you just
go back in time?
Just give us a thumbnail sketch of how all that got started.
Yeah.
And do me a favor. Give us an idea what your process was, because you were working. Who were you working for at that time?
I was at Urban Outfitters.
Okay, you were working at Urban Outfitters, and your position there was
finance director, so the head of finance at Urban Outfitters.
Okay, so with that in mind, somebody approaches you about this business. Go, tell us about that.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. There, it actually went back, and I think you know him, a good friend of mine, Ren Capacasal, who had a project done at his house, a hardscaping project, and it was put in by Mick's company. So he got a chance to know Mick a little bit because Mick was in his backyard.
That was Techniscape, I think was the name of the Techniscape was the name of the company.
Yeah. And first of all, Ren was uber impressed with the project and how and what Mick did and the design and the whole thing. And you know Ren, he's a pretty outgoing guy. He actually was home a handful of times when Mick was there and putting the project in, had a chance to talk to him. And Mick was talking about this whole concept of putting designs in projects. Sure. And what Ren had was, a basic patio. It had a little bit of curvature to it. But Mick said, what I'm really thinking about, if we could put a design in here, it would really put this over the top. And Ren was also somebody who had that kind of artistic background. And he was like, yeah, that's actually pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. And, Mick was like, well, I'm thinking about it. Blah, blah, blah. And Ren was kind of pushing him on, saying, hey, you should probably try to take this to the next level. That would be pretty cool. So that's how that little relationship started. And then I knew Ren really well. And he had pinged me one day, it was probably back in 2001, and he says, hey, I got this guy who I know who's got an idea, and he needs to try to get it to the next level and potentially turn it into a business. Would you just listen? Let's just go out to lunch. And he came in. Urban Outfitters was based on Rittenhouse Square at the time in Philly. And I never forget, we went, there was a restaurant right around the corner on Rittenhouse Square. So we went there for lunch, and it was really about Mick talking about this idea. And, I got Ren and Mick on one side of the table, me here. So I'm just sitting there listening to Mick, and all you had to do was look at Mick's face. And it's just the way he was, right?
Yeah.
He was an uber positive guy, really smart guy,
sincere,
super hard
very
worker,
sincere,
really sincere, just a great personality, and it's kind of guy you almost fall in love with, right? Just with listening to him. And he goes on, he describes this to me, and I'm thinking, wow, this is actually a pretty cool idea. And he's got pictures, and he's like, listen, here's what we do now, and he had all these sketches and drawings, and he's like, here's where I want to take this at the end of the day. And I started grilling him with questions on, does anybody else do this? What's the competition like? Let's talk about the process. How are you going to do this? And he had already done the research on water jetting, because he said he was limited in the field. If you do the hand cuts, you can only do angular hand cuts. So, angular hand cuts are going to limit the type of design you can put in a project. So he said, I took this a step further, and I've looked into it, and I got these water jets, and so he had the whole layout of the water jet and the whole thing. And, the wheels are turning in my mind. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. So we had lunch. He left me with the information, and, Ren calls me back. Because, again, the first time I met Mick, so Ren calls me back and said, what do you think? I said, wow, it's actually pretty cool. And he said, well, he needs a little help at this point to kind of pull all this together. And I said, well, what you normally do at this stage, you put together a business plan. Like, you really start to think out all the different aspects if this was to turn into a company. And Ren said, okay. And typical Ren's like, I told him you would do one. I was like, oh, thanks, Ren. I got a lot of free time. Right. With the 120% of my time that I'm focusing on Urban Outfitters. And he said, Ren does a good job of begging. And he's like, just can you do this? It'd be phenomenal, and then we'll get back together again. But it's like, all right, just you give me some time. So I'm like, okay, I give it a shot. Typical, like, weekend nights, the whole thing. Pulled a business plan together, and then connected with them again. We spent a lot of time in diners. We did all the diners in New Jersey.
Amen.
Because Ren lives in New Jersey, and obviously Mick was here. So I said, no, I'll come over and meet you guys. And Olga's, the whole diner. So that's what we would do. We had a handful of meetings where we go through the business plan, and I could see the look on Mick's face, because he would always light up. He's like, oh wow, it's like you starting to really come together and pull it together. And at one point, he had, at one of those, I think it was a dinner at that point, he had said, well, what are you doing? Like, what do you mean, what am I doing? I got a job. And he's like, no, like, what do you do? Would you want to get into this and do this? And I'm like, well, that's interesting. I was like, Mick, let me think about that. So one thing led to another, and it's, there's another piece is the patent side of it. Again, this is why Mick was really brilliant, because he thought ahead and realized he understood. I always talk to him about, I'd love to get into a business where you don't have to deal with a tremendous amount of competition, right? It just makes it a hell of a lot easier for you, because dealing with competition can be a pain, right? You have other things you got to worry about.
Pricing issues, costs.
Yeah, and it's just, if you can, it's almost like a moat around the business to protect the business, right? And Mick knew, people were doing it by hand back then. I don't think we were aware of anybody doing it by waterjet. And again, through one of these conversations, the discussion was around, to protect the business, we should see if we can get a patent. And Mick's looking at me saying, you think we have a chance to get a patent? I was like, I have no clue, but it's always worth a shot. So I knew an attorney who, you remember Gavin Lentz?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Who I probably have to be careful what I say about people. He was an awesome attorney. I call him a junkyard dog.
Yeah.
It's a guy who you want on your side all the time. Can I tell a story about him?
Absolutely.
there's what brought me to him, another buddy of mine, who I said, listen, dude, I need a good patent attorney, like one who would try to get something patented that would really be difficult to get patented, because I didn't think there was going to be the ability to do it, because I didn't see is there enough uniqueness in this process to be able to get a patent. And this guy said, oh, you know who you need? You need this guy, Gavin Lentz. And I'm like, what's up with this guy? Like, he said, well, he was able to get a patent for an inmate in prison for a see-through TV.
Wow.
I'm thinking, well, if you can do that, so in other words, one of the things in prisons, you can't bring stuff in, right? That's the whole thing. So
because you can sneak contraband inside of it.
Yeah, exactly. And somehow this guy wanted to get TVs in, and they wouldn't allow the TVs in because you could hide stuff in the back of the TV and the whole thing. So he said, well, why don't we just do a see-through TV? So we did it, and the guy got the patent, I think, while he was in jail. So I'm thinking, if he can get a patent, yeah, isn't America great? By the way, if he can get a patent for somebody in jail, well, then I think he can, do pretty well by us. So, and this was, I think, this was before the companies actually.
That's
started.
correct.
I think we got the patent before.
Well, we actually physically got the paper. We got the letter in like April of 03.
Okay.
We actually got the paper in May of 03, and that was what, if you looked at Mick's desk, that was, I think, his proudest moment, because that thing sat on his desk until he was no longer in the business.
It was like a shrine. It was like the, it's like Mary, like the halo.
Yeah,
the whole thing. So we go, and Gavin Lentz, this guy's really cocky too, right? So he's like, I got this, no problem, Ken. I'm like, really? You think we're gonna get? I guess not a problem. I got the guy. We'll connect it to the patent, investigator, the whole thing.
Well, let's explain. Considering the fact that water jets as an established product, have been around for 30 years,
right? And putting pavers in a design, that's probably nothing new too. So trying to connect the whole thing. So that was another key step. And there was another thing I'll mention too, in terms of how it all kind of came together. So you had the meetings and the business plan.
Right.
You had the patent that was also running parallel, and that took a little while to get. But really, I mean, now you go after patents, I think it takes years. This took months, which shocked the heck out of me. And then I'll talk about the first project, because that was the other thing. Mm-hmm. But the patent piece, I'll never forget, I was in my closet when Gavin called and said, hey, just want you to know we got the patent. I'm like, what? Like, it was at the end of the day or whatever. I'll never forget sitting there, and then I called Mick. Mick was in shock. He's like, you're kidding me? I have a patent? It's like, yeah. And you got your name and the whole thing, so you're good to go. So he's like, oh my God. And again, that was another piece in kind of the wheel in my mind, thinking, okay, so we got a business. It's a business that I'm interested in. By the way, as you know, I'm a frustrated architect. Even though I'm in business, I really wanted to go into architecture early on. So the whole concept of design or doing anything around building was interesting to me. So we got all those things going on. Now there's like, oh my God, there's a patent, so we get some protection on the business. And then while all this was going on, Mick was also an incredible salesman too, because people, you just like the guy, right? And he was the one working the whole Wildwood deal. I don't know if you know how that started, but he was.
I do. That was the Scott Vasallo connection with E.P. Henry.
Because E.P. Henry was such a huge partner to Mick and a huge partner to Paverart.
Well, the interesting part of the story, and when we write the book about Paverart, this will be chapter 1. And Mark and I have talked about this over and over again. In fact, we use it when you look at the marketing presentation that we do on Zoom.
Yeah.
The first 2 slides are Wildwood, which was the first job. We didn't have one piece of equipment.
There was a business.
We didn't have we weren't incorporated yet. Right. We had this job.
Right.
But the interesting thing about this was Wildwood had gone through a transformation. They did that whole doo-wop, Sosh Architects did that whole doo-wop presentation, and they put in a ton of decorative concrete.
Yeah.
And it was all spalling and started to break within 2 years and crack and all that. And we use that today when we still use it to this day as part of our marketing presentation. But Vassallo had gone in with the help of Mick and convinced the city, oh, you need to get pavers. These pavers will last forever. Oh, okay. What the hell's a paver? Okay. So, but the idea was, oh yeah, we'll build whatever design you want. Well, we haven't even started the business yet. Okay. Mick's committing us to, Mick's committing, and by the way, he's committing us to shit we haven't even started yet.
Right.
So, at any rate, landed the deal.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the
At this point, are you committed to come on and resign?
Not yet, because that was, of all these pieces that I'm talking about, that was the final piece.
To make you make that.
Because then it was like, oh my, because the question was this going to be something that would be acceptable?
Sure.
I mean, because an idea is great, but you got to cross over that fence and turn it into a business. At the end of the day, it's like
broad market acceptance is what's got to.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, well, is it going to work? And then again. I don't know why all these calls were in my closet, by the way. I don't know. Maybe there's something going on. That's another podcast.
You were looking for shoes. You were looking for shoes.
Right. I'm like the Imelda Marcos of the East Coast. But the same thing, he calls me, and this is before the company, before I decided to join, and said, hey, guess what? We got the Wildwood job. I was like, what? What do you mean by the Wildwood job? I didn't realize, no, and I thought it was one intersection, and he goes, guess what? I got 4 intersections. And when they want it by next spring, what? I'm like, okay, I guess we have to start a business now, right? Because it's like we didn't have anything. We didn't have I don't even think we had a location.
No, we had nothing.
Nothing.
No.
So
Pure Land wasn't even in the picture yet.
That was actually pretty interesting, knowing that. One, starting a business and all the stuff that goes into starting a business, right? It's all brand new, finding a place and people, and then we'll talk about you too in a little bit because you came on pretty quickly there. But you had this job, and Mick and I would look at each other like, we're going to be able to do this? Like after we've committed to doing, and this isn't some backyard thing. This was a commitment to a municipality, and then you saw it got really serious because all the documents and the township and this inspector and
this is 20,000 square feet spread over 4 intersections.
Yeah.
Walkway, the crosswalks, and then 4 separate designs. And we didn't own a piece of equipment yet or a property to put it on.
No.
And there was no.
And by the way, we didn't know. We hadn't figured out how to do it. Like that whole what we called back in the day the Paverart process. We still probably call that now. That whole kind of puzzle, because we didn't know if how do you even do that?
None of us had ever worked a water jet before.
No. So that was the thing that was actually pretty interesting. There was a who was the installer? That guy was a hoot.
We just talked to him yesterday.
Yeah.
Frank Lomagino. But I had to laugh. Mark was. I heard Mark talking to him. He said as soon as he picked up the phone, he saw it was Frank. And I talked to Frank about 2 weeks ago on this very same project.
Yeah.
Mark said, Frank, you're the all-star. You're in the Hall of Fame, but you're the Paverart Hall of Fame. And I knew that made Frank feel really good because Frank was the first guy to do this job.
Give him a lot of credit because he was the guinea pig in a huge way because we didn't know, first of all, we got to build the thing, then how are we going to ship it, and then how are we going to show the people in the field how to do it. And if you remember, he spent a lot of time at the facility. We were down in Swedesboro at the time.
At the Pure Land Industrial Park,
Infamous Pure Land Industrial, right. And he was phenomenal the way he worked it through. And I'll never forget the first check, because that was the first, we're sitting there hawking for money at the beginning. And, I've been writing a couple checks to get this thing started.
As I recall, I think it was $50K. 45, it was 75?
That's why it was. And
$75,000.
It was so tight that it was a Frank
Lomagino. Yep.
I was like, Frank, when are you going to, I would bug him. And he's like, Ken, I'll get you the check. It's like, would you just relax? I'm like, it's like, I got to make payroll. I need the check. I'll never forget, he was down, I had to meet him in one of those Atlantic City, off the turnpike there, the expressway, to pick up that check. And I was like beaming and then bringing it back. I remember we showed, like, look at this.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
So anyway, just to back up a little bit, but once the Wildwood job kicked in, then I was kind of hooked, because then if you add all those things up, I'm like, all right, I'm all the way in. And then we needed Mick and I are talking, it's like we need somebody that's going to do sales, marketing, handle that piece of the business. Because Mick, the way we looked at it, it's like, okay, I'll do operations and finance. Mick's going to do design and kind of running the shop at the end of the day. But it's like, well, who's going to market this thing? And that's when we called you.
Right.
Which I was sitting there crossing my fingers. I'm thinking, you had a good position at the time. And
Well, you actually bring up a good
way.
and this is interesting, I actually committed to leaving my my good job at the time to get involved with this before you did. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, you did. You're right.
So, because Mick and I spent the better part of a year, me toggling back and forth at nights and on weekends, because I didn't know a paver from a bassinet.
Did I catch the timeline right? You were contemplating for 2 years, and you were a year about.
I was
your pre-work, your business plan, your patent stuff.
Yeah, I guess it was probably late 2001 when we had that. I think we had that first meeting, or maybe the summer of 2000.
Yeah,
And like you were about a year.
it took.
Yeah,
I was approached about a year and a half after that initial meeting that you had with, because it had to go a ways before you decided that, okay, we need somebody to sell the stuff. But it was about a year and a half before we incorporated, which was March of 2003, when I got approached. And it was from that point forward, I was sold, and I'm not saying this to be, there was two things that sold me. Number one, the opportunity to work with my brother. The other thing was the opportunity to sell something that had never been made before. No competition. So the weight of selling this product is strictly on your shoulders. The quality of the product is strictly on Mick's, and the actual financial and the lifeblood of the business, keeping this running every day, was Ken's. I mean, to put it in a nutshell. And I talked to my wife, and we'll get into that in a second. But I committed pretty quickly. The opportunity. I couldn't pass this opportunity.
I think it's unusual. I think three of your caliber individuals, Meg, yourself, and you, Mike, that amount of runway before the business actually starts, and experience. You guys weren't 20-somethings. You guys had deep experience in different areas. Yeah. That's unusual, I think. In the world of stars.
You're right. And I always viewed it. It's like a band. It was like like Rush. A 3-person band that everybody has their expertise, but when needed, you did what you had to do. Across the board, right? I mean, you were phenomenal because if Mick was on the road, or Mick was, in early days, he was out there trying to teach some of the installers, and so he would travel to the job sites, whatever. You were on the road a lot because you were doing all your the presentations and you and the infamous lunch and learns. You must have done 2,000 lunch and learns with all the architectural firms. But a truck would pull up in the back, and the guy's like, "Okay, here it is. You got to get it off." I'm like, "You don't really want me driving." No, because well, you remember what happened. Our father had a business too. Remember, I ran into the wall with the forklift, so I had to think about forklifts. I was a little paranoid with the forklifts, but thank God, because you, as you know, you just do what you got to do, right?
You're wearing a lot of hats. Little sidebar. That was one of the reasons why when Mark first signed on, the one thing I insisted, you learn how to run that freaking fork truck, because as many guys as we have here now, you will be the only one here one day, and you're going to have to load a truck up. So, and he learned, and he does a very very good at it.
Yeah. Well, you're a better man than me, Mark. Because I would just drive it right off the. But anyway, that was kind of those were the beginnings. And you're right. You I think you came on in the spring. of 2023? Because you're right, I was probably a month or
2003. I quit my job on my 50th birthday. I quit but the mental commitment that basically fueled all the trips up here to see Mick.
Yeah.
And that's how Mick and I started to get close. Because Mick was you had to prove yourself to Mick. Mick was not. He didn't suffer fools gladly. I mean, you had to be the real deal before he would buy in. And then all those weekends and all those evenings and during the week, slowly but surely, we started to get close.
But I think the big difference, you were at a relatively small company, although successful.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
were a head of finance at a publicly traded company. No?
Yeah, Urban was public, yeah. That was probably, at that point, just approaching $1 billion.
Did you ever work in a startup? Prior to Paverart?
Well, not a true startup at the end of the day. There was another company I was with before, Urban Outfitters, a wholesaler and retailer called Eagle's Eye.
Got it.
Which was women's and kids' clothing. It was small. When I got there, probably did 30 million in business, and then it grew, and then that's when I then left. I was there for probably 9 years, and then went to Urban. I was at Urban for about 4 years, and then left and came here to Paverart. So
No, let's bookmark that spot too. But at the end of the day, you took Urban public.
well, no, they were public before.
They were?
Yeah, I did a lot of we did a lot of what they're called follow-ons to raise money, but they were probably public, I don't know, 5 years before I got there.
Gotcha. Okay, I was mistaken on that then.
But yeah, so I mean that was because I came on, I think a couple months after you.
Right.
Is when I showed up. But and that was the other thing too, Mike. The conversation for you, because you know Mike was the top salesman at my dad's company.
Sure.
So it's like here I am.
Not easy.
Yeah.
Well, I was
But being
technically speaking, I was the VP of Sales and Marketing for that company.
Yeah.
I had,
Yeah, you were like the big cheese.
And then, but to make a long story short, Dad was very, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But was very supportive of that. I mean, go. Just going to get a chance to work with your brother. You need to go. Just go do that.
Yeah.
And you worry. The culture we come from, you worry about leaving it in good hands. Well, we left it in good hands, and I'm sure Ken did too.
Yeah.
But you worry about your father. I mean, it's what's going to happen. I was like, what are you kidding me? I was here before you. I can handle myself. And I thought about it. And, yeah, you're right. So, but anyway, one of the things. By the way, great summation. That was you brought out some stuff that I forgot about. So
Yeah, that's the other thing too. By the way, I know we're having this conversation because when we talked about this, all the thoughts kind of come back to you. I don't know if it's the way the brain works. It's difficult for me to remember because that's why I want to talk about this too. Because it's like, oh, I forgot about that.
Sure.
We did that. We did this, and sometimes you get some of the details wrong, but sometimes you just. I think your brain can only hold so much,
Sure.
and it just starts to leak out. And so there's pieces I'm sure that I'm missing or forgetting about, but when you start talking about it, it starts to kind of flow back.
I'm kind of a business geek or a student of business. When you think about it, director of a publicly traded company, VP of Sales and Marketing, and Mick, look, mid-career, 3 individuals.
Yeah.
When you write the story
Sure.
on how we survived 2 years, I mean, I think that's unusual to have that level of experience come together.
Yeah.
3 senior leaders. That is impressive.
Yeah.
Now, it's also in the category of this stuff is freaking hard, right? In terms of how do you get to the next level once you start up and then go through the grind, and how do you break out of survival mode? And that's a whole different set of challenges.
Yeah.
To get beyond startup.
Well, you're right. Initially, that's what it was. It was survival mode. I mean, we were all doing stuff. We only had the one employee who was
Ryan.
yeah. So
Exactly. He was a friend of Mick's. Worked on one of Mick's crews.
yeah, and everybody did everything at the end of the day. I mean, that's and anybody who started a business knows that you just kind of dig in and do what you need to do, and you work hard, and it was a great team too, because that was the other thing. You knew you could rely on your partners. Mike had it handled, and no one had to tell or show Mike what to do in terms of selling something at the end of the day. Mick in terms of, I mean, keep in mind, this was all new. It was never done. So he had to figure out the technical side of this, the whole, taking an idea and then turning it into a technical drawing that then can be translated by a water jet, and then take this whole project, build it on the floor, which nobody did, by the way. Nobody pre-built.
Nope.
Most companies would just cut it and put it together and say, you figure it out. Every piece was pre-built. So we knew it worked, right? And we did it ourselves, and then have to take it down and then put it in a way that somebody in the field could then reinstall or install. This was all new, and Mick nailed that stuff cold. Because again, I think to this day, you guys probably the same thing. Never, when I was there, never a call from an installer. It's like, I can't figure this thing out. Never. Which that was the other thing. We're doing one of these. We're like, oh my God. When this gets to Frank in the field, is he going to be able to figure? Mick and I are staring at this thing like, Frank's a really smart guy, and we're thinking, I hope this is going to work at the end of the day. And yeah, he had a couple of phone calls, but they were a little bit different. They were more like technical for Mick. But in terms of installing it, and that's when it was like, okay, you go over these hurdles. That was another hurdle in terms of ease of installation, and it's like, okay, great, we can check the box on that. But that was all Mick and his expertise. So you're right, you had this kind of mix. I couldn't have done it. You probably couldn't have done it.
No.
There's no way I could have done the technical side in terms of the design. And Mick had a certain eye, taking a project and taking a work of art and saying, okay, we can either do that or not. And then you have the whole coloration, and we kind of worked on some of those things. But yeah, that's the piece that he did really well.
Sure.
So
I think one of the things that was really key, because you bring up an excellent point about the three different guys. I mean, we had really disparate personalities too. I'm the blustery pain in the ass. I'm the one. I'll talk. You want me to talk? I'll talk.
Yeah.
Mick was committed to the project. He was maniacally committed to the project, and just worked endless hours on this. Well, as it turned out, we all worked ridiculous hours, like the first 3, 4, 5 years this business started. But for people who are starting a business, I think the learning curve here is that if you're going to bring on partners, those partners have to carry each other. They've got to have each other's backs. And yes, I was good at sales. Ken was good at finance and administration, and that frustrated architectural background. He came up with a lot of the designs that we had. Okay, that's where he kind of stepped out of his comfort zone. Mick was just all over the place, and he just innately knew what needed to be done and got it done. But this required processes, and the processes that we use today are virtually tied directly to the processes that were developed back then. They've been improved upon in some respects. But it's funny you bring this up too about Mick. I think his greatest legacy is the fact that the guy that runs our factory is the guy that was taught by him.
Yeah.
Okay, to the day Mick passed away, Brian McNulty, the guy that runs our shop, all that, everything that he learned. Mick got him about 80% of the way to where Brian is now. To Brian's credit, Brian took and got the other 20% on his own, but the bases were all built by Mick.
Right.
And he trained under Mick for that. So I don't know where we would be if that didn't take place.
Sure.
So this is
that's truly
lineage and
there's
exactly.
In that story, to build on that a little bit with Brian, you're talking about Brian McNulty.
Yep.
The first story Brian told me when I bought the business was when Mick passed away, Brian's laying in bed at night staring at the ceiling, and his wife's next to him, Kathy. It was great. Brian's like, if I can't do this, assume what Mick was able to do, a founder of the business.
Yeah.
This whole thing's going to collapse, and it's on my shoulders. And Kathy,
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, the story Brian tells us, well, Kathy, only like a spouse can do, cuts through all the bullshit. But you better figure it out then.
That's right.
And here we go. And then Brian was like, oh shit, I better go to work tomorrow. And here we go.
Well, that's a lot like what Mick was too. There was no challenge that was too big for him, and he would always just say, I'll figure it out, don't worry about it. He was like uber confident, and he always did at the end of the day. But you're right, that was Mick's which also is pretty interesting about the business, that mix of art and science.
Right.
Right, and that's where it all had to come together in that process that Brian does now, because you're going to take an artwork piece, but you're going to have to turn it into a project that can be built by it, and worked on with a machine.
Exactly.
And so that's that art and science thing, and Mick always had that really good combination of that.
Why don't we take a second and talk about something that Mark and I expanded on about 20 podcasts ago, maybe more, and that's the influence of our spouses. When you're running a small business, it's not just the business that you're running. You're also trying to run your personal life, and a big chunk of that personal life is the relationship with your spouse, your wife. And how did that play in with you and Renee when you finally? I mean, that's a big cut.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a big move to go from Urban Outfitters
to zero.
That's right.
You can't get lower than zero.
But I know Renee. I know Renee. She's my sister-in-law. I love her dearly. She's fantastic. And by the way, the perfect mate for you.
Oh yeah.
Outside of Five Below, she runs everything else. So,
she is. Well, we call it a CEO of Bull Inc.
That's what did I tell you? That's exactly what Bev and I call it.
She runs the show. No, she was hugely supportive, because obviously we talk about any of those kinds of decisions, and it's the same thing we were just talking about in terms of Paverart, and just kind of trusting your partners and knowing that they have their expertise, and if they're going one way, it's like, okay, I'm with you, we'll follow. And when I mentioned it to Renee, and she knew what was going on, and she saw my interest, and she knew that, and we've always been supportive of each other. It's like, well, it sounds like it's something you want to do. Her question was around, okay, so what's going to happen from a financial situation? And I was like, I think we got it, right? Because I had stock in Urban Outfitters and the whole thing. So she's like, okay, well, if you think you've got it figured out, then it's like, let's go for it. Mm-hmm. Let's do it and give it a shot. So hugely supportive. I mean, what's that cliche? Behind every great man is a great woman.
It's a great woman, yeah.
And that's true for sure, because she was with me the whole time. And believe me, there were some rough patches.
Sure.
Especially starting off, because it's one thing to talk about a challenge, and then it's another thing to live through.
Right.
When it's like, hey, yeah, there's no salary here, so we had to adjust what we were doing in our lifestyle. But she was like, no, we can do it. We'll pull it off. And she was great that way. She was the one that kind of led that, and really supportive, saying, no, here's what we can do to kind of make this work. So huge. I mean, throughout my whole life, by the way, with with her. And the things that she's done have been just incredible. So huge, high five to her for what she's done.
It's they assume. And Mark, you and I talked about this, and Mark's neck deep in the same thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
Mark's an entrepreneur. Mark has come in and done tremendous work with businesses that you've worked with in the past. You came in here and bought this business, but that requires a certain commitment on his wife Kim's part. Okay. There's just an assumption of all these other responsibilities that you normally wouldn't have if you were still working at Urban Outfitters.
Right.
Or, if you were still at Kraft Foods, or if I was still at Chiarino. It's just, tremendous influence. So you
go back, and, you look back, it's a time, too, where, we were younger, things were different. Kids were younger.
Right.
I mean, that's a whole different scene, and I was always somebody who worked hard, but this amped it to the next level.
Sure.
I mean, this is 24/7 when you're starting a business, and we were going 7 days a week for a long time, and that's a big adjustment. So again, they couldn't have done it without her at the end of the day. So.
Well, So the spouse is probably the most. They're the ones you have to talk to and get the approval.
Isn't that the reason? again, director of finance, publicly traded, big job, and now going, and you weren't working 24/7 at Urban Outfitters. You were working
hard, but not
that level.
Yeah.
And then no salary, no income. I mean, that's probably the reason. That's why people don't make the leap to that type of thing. I got to think. It's going from a comfortable lifestyle to that. That's a shock. That's the frog in the boiling water right there.
Yeah. Well, you do. Like it's things you had planned, you put on hold. You have to sit down and redo your expenses, and you're like, okay, we're not going to do this. We can't do that. We can't do that. And then other stuff. I remember, something like a vacation. There wasn't any vacations. I mean, that's so. And you think about it, it's like, oh, what's the big deal? I don't have a vacation, but you don't realize, how important that was just to be able to get away. That all of a sudden, hey, it's not really in the cards to be able to go somewhere. But it's you adjust at the end of the day. And if it's something, I think if it's something you want to do, that kind of stuff falls to the wayside pretty quickly, right? Because it's like, hey, we've got a vision and a goal here, and we're going to go after this thing at the end of the day. And the vision was get this thing kicked off and get it started, and introduce this to the people out there. Because it all came back to this whole concept of artwork in what historically was a non-artwork setting, pavers, and being able to have people who, and they still do it today, I'm sure, when they see your stuff, it's we used to call it the wow effect, right? It's people go and think, wow, how did you do that? Like, that's incredible, the way it looks and how it lasts and the whole thing. So that was always what you worked towards, right? That was always the goal. So,
well, you and I talked about this briefly when we were prepping for this pod. Capital,
yes,
CapEx, it's a very important part of running a business, big or small. Our capital basically came, we don't need to go into the specifics of that, but at the end of the day, once the business had gotten established, after we had been around for about 3, 4, 5 years, there were a couple attempts to partner up with, like, I guess you could call them angel financiers, guys that would come in and partner with us. And none of that ever, and Mick was very aggressive in trying to find those people. Okay, because we needed, if you're going to grow the business, you need capital.
It's a capital-intensive business, right?
If you're going to wait around for your profit to generate, enough profit to generate that, pay all the bills, pay the give something to the owners of the business.
Right.
You're going to starve. So, but that never went anywhere. Why did that never go anywhere?
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, listen, it is a capital-intensive business. This is not a service.
We're a manufacturer.
You're manufacturing,
Yeah.
so you need the equipment, right? You need the marketing, all the dollars. And you're right. There was investments from myself, Dad. Loaned the business some money early on, and then it's like, okay, so we need to try to look for some more. So you're right. We went to, whether it was small equity firms, whoever it was, we had a laundry list.
Yeah.
I probably went on 10 to 15 of those. And I think the one common thread that the feedback that we heard, most of them I did. I took Mick on a couple, and you do the little dog and pony show. And people were really interested in it. They said, this is really cool. It's great stuff, kind of groundbreaking. We love that side of it. Doesn't feel like there's any competition out there. Understand that it is capital intensive. The word that we got back all the time was scale. We see this business having a challenge to be able to scale. And, for
Define that, by the way, so that people understand what you're trying to say.
It's like, because investors are like, hey, we know you have it here, but we want to do like 10x at least. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, they're not doing it because they love Paverart. They're doing it because they want a return on their money.
Right.
And so it's a financial transaction for them, and it's always about the exit. And they're thinking, okay, so how are we going to exit this business? It's either going to be a sale or some type of acquisition, or if you're lucky enough to go public, whatever. You only have a handful of options. But to be able to get there, the business is going to have to grow. And that was the piece that everybody that we spoke to, they didn't see enough from the early period and what we were able to show them, that they said, we just think this business is going to have a challenge scaling. and going from 1 million to 10 million to 50 million. So that was the response. And after the fifth or sixth one, it was like on tape. So I would just look over to Mick. I'm like, Mick, so at what time do you think they're going to use the word scale? So I'd say, oh, there it is, scale. Okay, all right, well, let's go out to lunch. But that was really the reason. And then you realize it's like, oh, okay. When you hear it so many times, you're thinking, okay, so we got to find another answer to this to kind of work around, because you need the capital, you need the funds to be able to continue to invest in the business and continue to push. But that was really the key driver there.
Well, Mark, when you bought the business, what were your thoughts? Because I'm curious about this. Now, you and I have talked about this also, but what were your thoughts in terms of capital infusion when you bought the business? What because you've got a playbook that you go by, which is tried and true. Can you expand on that a little bit?
It's humbling. The new piece of information I didn't have, which is interesting, is you said 10 to 15 you pitched?
Yeah.
Investors?
Oh, yeah.
That's humbling. It is. Hindsight's 20/20. Were they right?
Well, I mean,
they were right.
Yeah, if you look at the business, you look at the business now, it is a difficult business to. It's probably probably second year.
So look, we got the benefit to answer your question. We've got the benefit now of 20 years of hindsight, right? So this is not. But if you're pitching years 1 through 3, let's say, and you're pitching 15, and they all had the scale argument, it turns out they were right.
Yeah.
Because we went years 1 through 15, and we never broke through a critical threshold of investability, what I call. So they were right. However hard it is to hear. Now, I think they were. The problem was, though, it's not just money that gets you there.
Yeah.
So even if they struck you a check for picking a number, $500,000, $1 million, that wouldn't have been enough. It was a relatively tight team. You need employees, you need marketing, probably 30 things that you need, right?
Right.
And why, repeat your question again so I get it right.
Well,
my view coming in?
Yes, because you took a much different view of this business. First of all, you had to be sold that this was something that you were going to really want to like to do, okay? And I'll relay a story which is kind of funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting to me. It's something that he did about a month ago. But your thoughts when you came in and said, okay, in order to make this into what I think it needs to be.
Well, yeah, it was a little bit of what you went through, going from urban to a startup with no money, no salary type of thing. It's the impression that I had, a couple things. Great brand name. I mean, you couldn't come up with a better brand name, right? But I had this kind of gnawing feeling at the back of my mind that the team, small team at the time, they've got to re-fall in love with their product that they've created here.
Right.
I thought there was a lack of passion because of that survival.
Almost a malaise.
Just trying to get the product out the door. They haven't fallen in love with their product, and it's a great product, right? So that was kind of, I smelled opportunity there if we could figure out how to enable that. But it was, look, I had the awareness going in. I was a CEO of a $20 million company that we grew, and we had a nice exit. I knew there would be no money coming out for Kim and I for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I was kind of prepared to do that. So, and I had the challenge of, I've never done a scale-up type model where I come into something that's sustainable, but it's not throwing off cash for me to live off of. So, can I take a couple of years, 3 years, and try and go put everything that I've had in my career from different experiences and see if I can make an impact here. So I saw opportunity, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew it would be a grind. And could we market it? Could we build a team? Could we do all those? I saw that all as, but I was under no false illusion that this thing would be easy. I didn't think I'd be coming in, pulling money out of it. I knew it required a lot of capital. To your point about capital intensive, you couldn't have called it right. We put practically 90% of what we made for the 5 years that I've been here back into the business. And that's kind of humbling, right? But at some point you got to ask yourself, whatever job you're in, it's the line from Moneyball, Brad Pitt, when they're contemplating making a big trade, the Rookie of the Year, he asked, I forgot the guy's name, his sidekick, the young kid. How much do we believe in this thing? We either believe in a thing or not. So at some point, no one's got to ask themselves that question. When you come to the end of the year, you made a little bit of money, whether that was $25,000 or $2 million. The dollar doesn't matter. How much of that are you willing to put back in for the future? That's a key. I think a key determining factor. I mean, you see this when you're deciding on CapEx and plowing money back in. for store growth. Or
well,
whatever it is.
and that was, I mean, if you fast forward, because I was, when did I leave? 05.
No, you left.
Yeah, it was 05.
Technically, you left
I
06.
started Five Below in July.
But let's
of 05.
you left, but you didn't leave.
Oh, no, I was, for a couple of years.
Right.
Well, until I actually sold it the
The
first,
first time, that's when you that's when you
whatever.
left the first time. So you were here for about 13 years.
But just to get back to what Mark's saying, unfortunately, that was the realization that I came to. That it's like, still passionate about the business and, the ability to make something for customers and do all that. But looking to my left and right, and that's what I had to unfortunately tell you guys, that was a sad day, where it's like, guys, I don't think this is going to work with the three of us. Mm-hmm. There's not going to be enough here in the near term. So, somebody's got to make a decision here. And obviously Mick wasn't going to go anywhere. And that's when I had to, talk to you guys and say, listen, I think I need to move on because I don't think three of us is going to work.
Sure.
Right, to be able to do it. So, but you're right. That's that. Knowing that early on, but then you're thinking, okay, this thing is going to turn. It's going to turn. And you just get to a certain point. It's like, okay, this is going to take longer than I thought, and it actually will do a disservice to everybody else because it's not going to work with three people.
Sure.
Because get to the point where you start to run out of time, and that was really kind of what fueled my decision. After at least we had that conversation in 05.
Right.
But you're right. I was still part of the business. I would come here, late Friday nights and, whatever it was to keep stuff going because I didn't want to leave these guys because even the financial stuff and whatever else was going on, it's like, no, I'll keep doing that on top of, talking about a startup. Five Below was a startup at that point when I went to them. But,
let's not.
you hit right on that.
Well, let's not forget too. It wasn't just that. It wasn't just coming here and doing the accounting work on Friday nights after you would leave Five Below or Saturday, whatever it was. You also basically mitigated disagreements between me and Mick. Because
I remember that. Yes, right. Yeah.
Like any good business,
many a phone call.
Yeah, look, it's I want to put the reins on something. Mick wants to move forward, or Mick wants to put the reins on something. I want to move forward. We disagree. Kenny would be the arbiter. The beauty of the triumvirate that was the three of us was the fact that disparate personalities, but the one personality that really tied it all together was Ken, because he was the calming influence. He listened to everybody. One of the best listeners I've ever met, and had an ability to, much like yourself, had an ability to tear an issue or a problem down and rebuild it with a really, really commonsensical answer. All right, here's where I think we should go. Okay, Mike, you need to do this. Mick, you need to rethink that. Whatever it might be, you were always there for that. And that's what to me, doing the accounting work just took a huge load off of everybody's mind. Okay, because that's moving the business forward by keeping it in business, all right? But moving the business forward was selling the stuff, making the stuff, getting it out the door, handling inventory, everything that everybody's got to do when you're running a business. But but those decisions, that had to be made, and they came up about once every couple of months or so. Ken, I'm having a problem.
No, and actually, it's one of those things you say you can only remember so much. I actually forgot about all that, but you're right.
And that's usually 9 o'clock at night because you're not leaving Five Below until 8.
Right.
8:30, and I'm crazy. I got to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I
know. It's like working with
Mike.
an Amish person.
Here's Bev, what are you?
The sun goes down.
It's that's right. My wife's like, Mike, what are you doing? I got to call Ken. I can't get him until 9. 9? What's he doing? He's working. What do you think he's doing?
I know. Well, that's what you got to do. But you're right. And that what it did, what you noticed. And I always felt bad about that because it changed the dynamic, right? Because I'm not there, and decisions have to continue to be made, and they're not easy decisions, and there's multiple points of view, whatever it was. And I remember those phone calls I'd hear from you, and then I talked to Mick, and we then try to get together or whatever it was. But yeah, that went on for a while.
Well, we were fortunate that you didn't have anything else better to do, so you had you had a lot of free time, lots of free time. Five Below, Tiger by the tail, by the way.
The crazy stuff that was going on there. But that was kind of fast forward to those years. But
one of the things that always interested me about this, and both of you guys can answer this question probably better than I can for sure. What did you see, Mark, as the problems when you came to this business and decided that you wanted to buy it, number one? And then, Ken, what were those problems that you saw prior to making the commitment to come on and say, you know what, I want to be part of this business too? What were like the top 2 or 3 issues that you felt needed to be dealt with very seriously when you were involved with starting the business and you were involved with buying it and taking it to another level? Answer at your discretion. But that to me, that's fascinating to me because look, there's a lot of good stuff. When you came, there was a lot of good stuff that was already established, and you outlined it pretty well before. But it's a big unknown when you're coming into this. But your background and experience in business and just your business intellect and your gut, what were some of those things that you felt were going to be a serious challenge, and how did you feel we needed to get over those?
The number one concern was sales for me.
Okay.
In other words, that you keep in mind, this is a new product it's never been done before. So my initial concern was like, okay, it's a phenomenal idea, great idea, but are customers gonna pay for it?
Right.
Like, is this what they want? I didn't have any concern we wouldn't have the ability to deliver, just knowing Mick, right? And that was, by the way, the other side of that question too, is what you're not concerned about. And anything you do, it's always about the people at the end of the day. So no concern around Mick, and that happens sometimes when you have a partnership and you work closely with people, whatever it is, because you don't really know them until you start to spend 24/7 with them, and then maybe things change. But no concern about you and your abilities and Mick. That's the thing I was confident about. It's like we'll figure it out, whatever challenge we're faced with. The question for me was, is the customer going to buy this at the end of the day? And then there's the little sub piece. I was concerned about pricing, because when we did all the math on pricing, I'm the value guy. Just look where I've been and what I've done, right? So I'm the one that's always concerned that the customer's not going to go for this because it's overpriced and they're not going to see the value at the end of the day. I mean, I do that in my personal life. Talk about my wife, she's the same way. It's always about value and what you get for the dollar. And when we started doing the initial costs, when you did the business plan, went all the way back to that, part of it was, okay, so what are your profits going to be, the cost of goods, the whole thing. We started to build it from the bottoms up with Mick. I was like, oh boy, this is like one of these. What was the initial price on a 4-foot like compass rose?
Well, there was 2 initial prices. The first initial price when I went out to go sell it, like a compass rose, was like $1,800.
Yeah.
Okay, it was approaching $2,000. Now, but there's a funny story behind this, but
we like.
But that was the first initial foray out. I'm calling on distributors and saying, yeah, they said, man, that's really great. Mike, I've never seen anything like this. This is fantastic. What do you want for something like this? $2,000. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, you got Mike. It was we call them the WTF road trips. It was like, hey, did you get the WTF yet from the thing? We did. We pushed you. It's like pushing you off the gangplank.
Yeah, but it didn't take long.
The compass rose, go for it, Mike. It's like,
within months.
Yeah,
we ratcheted back the pricing, and all of a sudden we started to sell. Things started to sell.
You spend a few days staring at your screen. It's like, why isn't there no more orders? Where are the orders? It's like, that's it. We're lowering prices, and then it's like, bing, 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 bing. They started popping up. So, but initially that was my concern when I did the math. I'm like, because you put yourself in the customer's shoes, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure I would pay that much for this. And so where are we going to, or is it going to be this market? Because then the other thing is, there were so many possibilities. And I know
Right.
It's kind of a little cliche because that's what we started off with. Because we knew we could do the big municipalities and the streetscapes. You could do commercial stuff.
Institutional, colleges.
What was the bank that we?
Commerce.
The Commerce Bank. We did all their Cs because they put all the Cs in the sidewalks. And then we knew there was potentially a residential market. But when you got to the customer side, that was the challenge. So those were the two things. Some of the other things that people get concerned about, I wasn't concerned about because, again, to me, it's always about people. And it's like, you got the best people here. We'll be fine. It's just, hey, is this going to be able to work with customers? Will they buy it? And then the subtext is the pricing going to be okay? And you found out pretty quickly when you got out there.
Yeah, we amended that. And we amended that. It was more than a little. It was a lot high. Yeah. Now, what's interesting is that we don't sell a Compass Rose now for less than $1,700. Okay.
That's amazing. And you sell a boatload.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
How many did we sell last year? That's just a tremendous amount of this. And but again, that was all instituted by Mark, which is why I like to throw the question to you. What were some of your concerns? There was enough positives to make you buy in. What were some of your concerns, and how did you feel you were going to deal with those?
Well, Ken said it well, and you said it too when I interviewed you. It's you got to get the sales beyond a threshold where they can throw off a little bit of money where you can do some things with, right? Build a team.
Right.
So it was, and your word was exposure. We needed exposure, and then
right.
Shout out to Kim, my wife. We did a project in 2014 when we moved back to Jersey from Memphis. We did a fire pit, we did a patio, a little sidewalk, we did a retaining wall in the front. So when I first learned about Paverart, first thing I did was shoot it over to Kim. I said, tell me what you think, look at their website, give me your thoughts. She came back with adult language and said, why the F did our contractor not talk about us with that? And I'm like, all right, let me call her up. And what do you mean by that? She goes, this Compass Rose thing, you see this? We would have put that in our backyard. Yeah. And, by the way, this thing, the Elements Collection or whatever, however you were marketing it at the time.
Yep, it's Kenny.
We would have done one of those in it, but we could have put two. Do you know how much it cost? I didn't know at the time. But the fact that she saw it, and it was a kind of a visceral reaction.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, I don't know. She said she blamed it on the contractor. And I'm like, don't blame the contractor. He probably had never heard of Paverart, is my guess.
Right.
Now, fast forward 5 years, even if he does know about it, he probably, knowing what we know about contractors, he wouldn't have even brought it up. That's kind of broad stroking. So exposure is important, but sales, you had to get, probably 95% of all small businesses in America don't sell.
Right.
Well, when the owner retires, they get to whatever age, they can't sell it, it's not sellable, or they don't get the price they want. This stuff's hard.
Yeah.
So that was my impression.
Yeah, no, because when you mention that, it reminds me that that was also one of the challenges too, because that was a response you always got when people looked at it, and you're working with these people directly, even the landscape architects who they're off in their world doing their thing, and basically designers at the end of the day, and even I think the response was extremely positive. They're like, "Whoa, are you telling me I can put a design now in what I've been doing for years and years?"
Yeah.
So they were blown away. And we would talk about this all the time. We were just like 1 degree or one connection away from really getting it there.
Right.
And so that was where the marketing piece, and that was the challenge. Like, how do we get there? How do we do the connections? And the challenge was you're not going directly to the customer at the end of the day. And so you have to rely on everybody else. And that was the other thing we learned, because you spent a lot of time, tremendous amount of time with all the not the hardscapers, but where they
distributors,
yeah, and to try to convince them. But you start to realize that again, it's not their business. It's very difficult to get them vested behind Paverart. Right. And so maybe the design would sit there in the front of their location, and then you go back a couple months later, and it's over in the corner somewhere, and nobody's looking at it. And then it just kind of dies off.
That's right.
That was
channel partners.
That we didn't know that going in, but when you talk about the challenges of the business, that's when it already started. We're like, okay, how are we going to crack the code on this one to end up getting to that end user? Because you show it to them, they love it, but it was very difficult to connect the dots.
I think the social media, when Kim had that visceral reaction, we just spent this much money on our backyard, and why didn't we know about this? The contract. She blamed it on the contractor.
Sure.
Yeah.
The contractor's not the only one. it wasn't, you didn't stumble across it at the moment of truth when you're Googling patio ideas or whatever it is. We never showed up or we didn't advertise. So, but if you got that reaction, I noticed there had to be an opportunity if the end user would see it directly at scale, at some level of significant volume. So that screams of opportunity. Now, the other thing, back to your original question, when you've got a one machine plant and all of your eggs are in one bag, that's just risky, right? So, there had to be a capital scale up of more machinery, redundancy. I mean, all the risk management things that you go through. What if one person, God forbid, gets hit by a bus and you don't have redundancy of people, machinery, all those things, they matter. Now, that's just stuff, that's the hard work you got to do to kind of build out a viable business that's beyond survival mode. None of it's easy, and it takes money, it takes patience, and the one thing about private equity, I'm intrigued by the 15 to 10 investors that you went to.
Yeah.
They're notoriously, if there's a world of ADD, investment guys are it in the world of private equity. They want to return, they say 5 to 7 years. Bullshit, they want like 3 to 5 years, right?
Yeah, 3 to 5.
And they want to triple their money, quadruple their money. So I don't know. Look, I think I'm pretty good at business, but to get that kind of, and I've done that before, but to build something great. Look, Paverart's here for 20 years, 15 of which is a tale of survival. And maybe 5 years we can start to talk a little bit about growth.
Right.
That's a long freaking time. No investor wants to sit around for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you need decades to build a great business that's viable. I've always thought one of my highfalutin goals was to build the greatest little plant in America, whether that's a food business or Paverart. That doesn't mean biggest, but the great, a vibe, a culture, all those things.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
You need a runway of time and
while.
wins and battle scars. So in a lot of ways, the investment community and building a great business over time, those are kind of opposites. Now, obviously, there's exceptions, Five Below. I mean, all the publicly traded companies, they find a way to do it and do it well. But small business, you need time to build out and do all those things that we're talking, especially small manufacturing. Totally different world.
Well, if you look at the map, over the last 5 years, the first thing was pricing. That's the first thing that you hammered. Okay, that was number one.
Yeah.
Number two was once that kicked in, and we had about 2 years worth of profits under our belt in that respect, then there was the next machine. Okay, the second cutter. And then while that was going on, there was the rebuild of the website. I'm sure Kenny remembers. I remember the first website.
Oh my God.
We had like 5 pieces.
And this was before. The internet was obviously around, but not like it.
No
the
way.
whole digital.
No way.
Social media was not back in 20 years ago.
There was no social media.
No.
But the next thing to kick in after that, but that took a lot of work, was all the in-house social media stuff, and that was Mark basically on his own doing that, and that has paid huge dividends.
I mean, that's the tactical stuff you can get in and start working. I mean, you mentioned it, the team that you build out. That's probably the hard. I think the human element of business. That's really the hardest thing.
That's the biggest piece.
Remember, but this goes back to the whole exposure thing. We can have that team, we can have all this shit in place, but at the end of the day, you got to have 9 people calling you that week asking for compass roses, and you got to have at least 2 or 3 big projects on the books at any one time. That's and that doesn't come without the whole social media aspect.
Sure.
I mean, you can target landscape architects now. You can target states. You can target end users. Relay the tale of the woman that you spoke with yesterday. You told me the story that the woman.
She sweetheart of a lady, business owner.
Yeah.
She was building a house down the shore. She owns a business, and she said, "I don't know what you're doing with your marketing, but it's working. I found you in 5 places." I was on Pinterest doing research.
Yeah.
And I asked her a question. I said, "What do you do when you're doing research? Where do you go?" And I'm thinking she's going to say Google. She goes, "Pinterest. That's my first line of doing research. It's visual. I type in patio ideas, and I go look at patio ideas." Her contractor actually referred her to us. But then she's going out. She's a business person. She wants to see what are the options in the market. She goes into her, I think it was a wish list or pin board. I forgot what the terminology was. And she's got 5 different designs, and they all have Paverart tagged to it. So, and she found us on some other thing. So whatever it is working.
It's amazing.
Were they just things that she saw, or did she have pieces installed for her? for herself?
She just bought a piece yesterday.
Oh, she did.
She bought a 6-foot compass.
I know that. You're right. The whole social media thing.
But the idea was wherever she went and typed in whatever search words, whether it was Pinterest, Instagram, Google, Facebook, wherever she went.
Well, that's you.
You're a TikTok fan, aren't you?
Correct.
Are you a user of TikTok?
Huge, but don't tell anybody.
But this thing is,
Don't tell the Chinese.
I mean, the entertainment factor alone, and I'm like, you can't keep up with this. I mean, I spend maybe an hour a day trying to learn these things. I mean, this thing is it's changing so fast.
TikTok's really moved. I know we use it pretty heavily in Five Below now. It was one of the social media, sites that came on a little bit towards the end. But yeah, it's everybody's on that stuff. Instagram, obviously you mentioned Pinterest. I mean, you still use the Facebook for the parents. It's not that cool for the kids, but that social media was a game changer because the stuff we were trying to pull off with, I mean, you have to make a phone call or do a visit. I mean, just think of how inefficient it is.
The only advertising we did were paper ads in 2 magazines.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, the landscape architect, and it's just very kind of
and hardscape,
static, rigid, inflexible marketing. You didn't know really where it was going. Where the digital thing is so targeted. And then you can get the metrics and the analytics back from these companies to say who's clicking in and how many times and the whole thing. So it's great that you guys have done that because that's solving that problem we talked about, connecting the dots and kind of getting it out there because of people. And you hear it all the time. You're hearing it. I think when you came on, you probably said, when people see it, they're like, my God, this is like really cool stuff. And so that's really the key is to get that out there and get the awareness out there.
We've always said if you get them the call, we'll close.
Yeah.
We'll definitely close. We got the ability to close.
And by the way, you get back to, you made the comment again about people. That's the other thing, just looking to what you've done. Everybody bar none always said that they had, because we're always concerned about the customer, so we'd circle back and maybe I would do a phone call or Mick or you, whatever, say, hey, did everything work out for you? Is everything okay? Every time they said, working with you was just phenomenal. It's like, because that's one thing that's not a given these days is the customer service side of it. And there is, depending on the project, there could be a lot of customer service that's required on some of the stuff, right? Especially a big project, and all the way from homeowners to installers to landscape architects. They would all love dealing with Mike. I mean, it's just, that was a huge,
nice of you to say.
Huge deal. Because you could have, just think about it, you could have all the pieces figured out, have a crappy customer service, nobody's coming back, right? You're not going to get a return customer, and that's what we did. And you probably have it now, I'm sure, get that return customers, whoever it is. Sometimes the homeowners may be a one and done because it's probably a big project for them, but the hardscapers, the landscape architects, whatever, and that's another key piece of that puzzle too.
Well, we got lucky. We got lucky when Mark decided to buy the business because Mark is an unbelievable customer service guy. And
that's key.
I think when you've got that double-headed monster on the phone, it's like I said it all along. If we get the call, we'll get the sale.
Seth Godin's got a great, you said cliche. I went to a presentation and he's a professor of marketing. He's one of these authors, written probably 20 books. If the acid test for business, if your business went away tomorrow, would anybody miss you?
Yeah.
Right? A great saying to kind of try and live by that. You're trying to build that acid test and be more durable over time.
Yeah, exactly.
But that goes back to product. I mean, as well as customer service. I think you're right. There's customer service is so shitty. We did a whole episode on customer service and
don't even. Oh man, you got to listen to that episode.
We went on a rant about how bad it is and no manners, just all the things that are horrible.
Nobody cares. It's it's almost like you're doing them a service by buying or doing whatever it is that you're doing. It's like, really?
I know we're tight on time. Can you relate a little bit about your Five Below experience? The world post Paverart. How does that look, and what can you share there?
Well, that's a whole other journey, right? And that was a startup when I signed on. There weren't many people there, and a much smaller business. I think when I started, we had about 25 stores. But again, I think it comes down to people. I was very lucky in the businesses I was in to work directly with the founders and the entrepreneurs, whether it was Eagle's Eye, the two brothers that founded that company, or even Urban Outfitters, and work alongside somebody like Dick Hayne, who's still I guess he's the chairman and CEO still, and work with him. He founded that business. And then with two gentlemen, Tom Velios and David Schlesinger, who started Five Below, which just, it's an unbelievable concept. I mean, think about it. Still, nobody is doing what we're doing out there. We're basically probably one of the only national kids retailer out there. But if you look at what they designed, it still holds in terms of the experience. What did it for me was, again, I have to be connected with whatever it is that the business does. And the first store was opened right around where I live in a Gateway Center in I think it's Wayne, Pennsylvania, they call it. I'm just a few miles away. And Renee, my wife, and I went in, and she couldn't get me out of the store. I was in the store for 45 minutes, and it's not a really big store. And she's like, what's going on? I was like, this store is unbelievable. Look, they have this. And I thought it was a local store. Little did I know that I had met both Tom and David, because when I was at Urban, we do these retail dinners, or dinners for retailers in the city. They always ended up sitting next to me at these dinners, and we just got to talk. Because I was at Urban. They were at a place called Zany Brainy. I don't know if you remember Zany Brainy. David Schlesinger founded that, and that's where Tom was there, and they met each other there. And they were interested in sports. I'm in sports. We talk about the Sixers, the whole thing. And so we got to know each other, and they had called me after I was thinking about what was going on here and how's it going to work out. They had pinged me a couple times, and it's like, no, I got this going on here. I think we're going to do it. It's like, well, listen, we think we figured this out. We're at a point where we want to start really rolling this out. And we finally they had their equity infusion in the early 2005, when it stepped up from friends and family investors to an equity firm in Philly. And one thing led to another, and it's like, okay, let's give this a shot, because it sounds like it's pretty interesting. And obviously here we had to unfortunately make that decision to kind of move on. But yeah, that's just been an incredible journey. I mean, it's been 18 years, and high growth retailer. I don't know of any other retailer that's grown at this pace, more than 20% a year for this long. Yeah, it is. When you live it and you do it day in and day out, sometimes you got to step back every once in a while to kind of appreciate it. There's all these milestones when you open up. We opened up our 100th store, was a big deal for us. And when you break into new markets, when we opened up Chicago, when we opened up Dallas and the South, and then out in California, because you can't really consider yourself a national brand, and unless you're going to be successful on the West Coast too, and that's not always a given. And so that was a big one. Going public, so we've been public for just over 10 years. That was a big deal. So it's just been one thing after another. I mean, to go back to when I started there, and David and Tom pulled one over on me because we were talking about the finance team, and they said, "Oh yeah, no, we got a team there for you, ready to go." But I'm like, great. Show up the first day, and there's not many people in the office. So I'm like, "Hey guys, where's the finance team?" and Tom, I think it was Tom, said, "Oh, we have one. They're not here though." I'm like, "Oh, where are they? Are they coming back? Did they go somewhere?" They're like, no, they're not employees. We use this firm to do all the accounting. I'm like, okay, so it's going to be one of these things. So the firm was if you remember Arthur Anderson, and the kind of demise. Enron was the beginning of the end for Arthur Anderson, and they went out of business, right? And they had these spin-offs, and they had a group that did accounting services based in Philly. And our office has always been in Philly, downtown Philly. And it's like, okay, well, first day I'm going to go see my, team over there. So where are they? Well, they're at, 18th and Market or some building. It's like, okay. So I go, I get in the elevator, go up to the floor, get off the elevator, go in. It's like, hi, I'm looking for the Five Below team here. They're like, oh, okay, it's right, they're right over there, see them. And I go to this corner, and I see this woman, she's just like this. she's got her head in her hands. It looks. I see the shoulders. I'm like, oh my God, it looks like she's crying. So I'm coming up behind her. She's got invoices like this high all around. I just see. And you know me, I shock people when I come up. It's like, excuse me. She's like, who are you? Do you need to get paid? No. I just started at Five Below. I just, head of the charge of finance and everything. I just wanted to meet you guys. Bust out in tears. Like, what's the problem? I can't get anything. He's paid. Look at this. Like, oh my God. So it's like, okay.
Let's get to work.
Yeah, I gave her the napkins, and it's like, just give me 10 minutes. I'll be back. And so I walk back to the office.
Right.
And it's like, guys, what is going on here? They're like, yeah, well, that's why we brought you on board. You'll be able to figure that out. Good luck. Oh, my God. We couldn't pay vendors. It was the meetings, the Monday, because in retail you do Monday meetings, right? Because you always talk about what happened last week in business. The Monday meetings were more about the payments to the vendors. And I would walk in the Monday meeting, and I'd get yelled at by all the buyers. Because, Tom and David, right? And they'd be like, hey, what's going on? There's hot items. Yeah, well, this sold out, but we can't get any because Ken didn't pay the vendor. So we got empty shelves. I'm like, what did I walk into here? And Tom, after about 3 or 4 of those, because he saw how frustrated I was getting, remember Staples had that easy button? That little easy button? Yeah. Well, that was easy. That's what it said. Tom was handing those out. He gave me one. He goes, Ken, let's be real. Just take one of these. If you have a problem, just press that button on I said, Tom, you know what, Tom? Go F yourself. That's not going to help me get these goddamn vendors paid. And little did you know, we had to raise money, which you appreciate this. And we did. We had equity. We did raises at least once a year, if not twice a year, where you had to go out and sit with, and then you had to report to all the friends and family. And when you do friends and family, it's like, and I don't want to sound disparaging here because thank them for all that they did to start the company, but they're such an odd group. I mean, you go from, Pat Croce was one of the early investors.
Right.
Great guy. And he would come in with his buddies. He would come in with his friends. And, it's a Ken, and you had to always adjust to whoever you were. Sometimes it was a more sophisticated investor and had an equity fund that was totally different. You had a sophisticated investor, they brought their attorneys. Then you had just the family and friends who they'd come in.
Sure.
You had this one group, it was like the Addams family. I mean, and the great questions. And listen, their money is as good as everybody else's, so you have to treat them the same at the end of the day. But my God, they come in and there was the older kind of the patriarch of the family who they'd wheel and put in the corner. He was like 95, and he'd sit there in the wheelchair. And it's like, okay, so let me talk to you about the last 6 months, and here's what we've done, and we're doing this, and we're investing, and asking good questions. And I'm looking out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, is anybody going to keep an eye on him? Like, is he going to make it through this meeting? And he out of nowhere, I'll be in the middle of saying something. When are we going to get our money back? It's like, and I would look at the rest of the family that was in like, don't listen to him. And I was like, no, I should probably answer his question, right? No, don't. Just keep going. Just ignore him. And then he'd go back off. And then back in the corner. So, I mean, listen, I got stories there, but those are the early days.
Sure.
The early days, but there were some fun days. But no, it's been a tremendous ride. I mean, obviously.
Well, when you got to that point, what I was going to say was, and I think this is important for you to understand. When you got to that point with, Tom and what was the other gentleman's name? David. Tom and David.
Yeah, great.
So what did you leave me with here? We would have accepted you back to Paverart in a heartbeat. So,
it was.
If you ever wanted to come back, we were here for you.
But it's the same thing that we said before. It goes. They were. I've been really lucky to work with great people, and the team that was there was phenomenal. They were incredible. So it always goes back to me, it goes back to the people, and it goes back to whatever you're doing in the product. And I still felt so confident about the stores. And we had the same issue early on. It was an awareness issue.
Sure.
and we had to do some more marketing and get out there, because once people go in the store, they love the store, and it was all about the experience, and it was just kind of crossing over that threshold. So those were kind of the early days. But again, I had no concerns, because again, great people and a great concept, which the goal was, you got to turn that concept into a brand at the end of the day. But that's that's what it was about. So.
Well, I'll wrap this up with a story, if you guys don't mind. The Kenny and Renee had gotten a place down in Naples, Florida, and I think it was last year. When Bev and I came down to visit you for a long weekend. That was a tremendous weekend. I really enjoyed that. But part of that weekend was you had a dinner at one of the local establishments, and it was a good chunk of your team at Five Below that was down there for meetings or whatever it was, because all of a sudden Naples became Five Below South, or 1600 Chestnut Street South.
Right.
And he invited Bev and I to come to the dinner, and I got to sit next to the CEO. Okay, Joel. Yeah, exactly. Phenomenal. Yeah. Joel is just terrific guy. He really is a terrific guy until I talk to him. And as the guy that just, I'm not going to hold anything back, but I wanted to make sure that he understood that we did not appreciate the fact that Five Below stole my son of a bitch brother, and from Paverart, just as we were this close to breaking out. Yeah. And Joel, I just want to let you know I didn't appreciate that. Everybody at the table's looking at me like, where's he going with this?
Where's this going?
And then I started to laugh, and everybody was fine. But Joel's Joel's mother was there for that dinner too, as I recall. She was a pistol. She was absolutely a pistol.
Yeah.
And Beth, I'm getting a little nudges from Beth. Shut up, just shut up.
No, that was great.
It was a great night.
And just to give Joel credit too, because he, we went through a founder transition, which that's a difficult thing to do, and it's not easy, and a lot of companies have not succeeded. The business changes, whatever it is, and he came in 2014. Five Below started in 2002, so that's after 12 years of kind of being founder run. And then you see where we are today. So credit to him.
By the way, let's talk. It's just one thing. What number stores do you have now? When you were there, they started at 25. Where are they now?
Actually, the number, and we give out a shrunken basketball to everybody that starts, and on that basketball is the date that you start and the number of stores. And the idea behind the basketball, and listen, we do a whole other podcast on culture, because that's the other thing I think is critical in terms of a success of a business. But the being able to sell a $5 basketball, because that was one of the challenges early on to the team, to say, hey, listen, you can't have a kid's store and do all this stuff and not have a $5 basketball, or a basketball for the kids. And everybody looking at it, it's like, how are we going to pull off a $5 basketball? You're not going to be able to land it for less than $5. Well, you think it through. It's like, we don't need to put it in a box like they do with the other places, look like the toy soldiers on the shelf, because the whole concept with Five Below, as you guys know, is play with the stuff when you get inside the store. And then the other thing is, the ones in the box are inflated. So they're obviously taking up space in those containers. So deflate it, give the stores...
give them on a truck.
Yeah, and give them the air, let them blow them up at the store, and there you go. All of a sudden, you do enough to reduce the cost down. So that was kind of the culture of how you thought around problems to make it work, and we still continue to do that today. But they hand those out to everybody. Now, so everybody has their basket. Mine was actually 27. I kind of rounded 25. But 27 was the number of stores when I started.
Right.
But we've got over, I think, 1,350 stores right now. So we're one of the only retailers out there that are still opening stores, because honestly, the market out there is over-retailed. If you look at us compared to kind of the rest of the world, there's too many stores. You probably hear some of the stories going on with some of the retailers now. But it's like us, and you've got the dollar stores. Dollar General is, another year of 1,000 stores. I don't even know where they can put them. but they keep pulling that off along with a company like Dollar Tree. But there's only a few out there that are actually opening. We're going to open up 200 stores this year, and that number is going to continue to climb. But as the years go on, so we think we have an opportunity just in the 48 states of over 3,500 stores. Mm-hmm. So the crazy thing about this, as much as I've seen in terms of growth, it's going from 27 stores to over 1,350, but then knowing that there's more than 3,500 out there. And I've been telling this to a lot of people recently, especially you got to hire a lot of people, right? So there's a lot of new people in there that there's more opportunity now than when there was when I started. If you look at where we can go and what we can do, which is it's incredible to think about. So it goes back to the beginning of the conversation, just the powerful concept that David and Tom put together, that it's lasted this long there's nobody that does what we do. There's we compete with everybody at the end of the day based on whatever product we're trying to sell, but we sell all different types of products, and that's the thing that's still amazing to me.
It's amazing to me. The whole concept, I'll never forget the first Five Below I saw was in the Fairfax Shopping Center.
Yeah.
Right around the corner from where Mom and Dad
That
live.
was number 3, I think.
Unbelievable.
Because it was Gateway. We did a small store in King of Prussia, which I think maybe Wilmington was number 2, but Wilmington and that Fairfax Shopping Center. Yeah, right next to the, it took the old Imperial Delicatessen.
Yeah,
where I started.
Where you used to work.
And I had all my hoagies that I made would get slapped off the table because I put too much meat on these for my buddies who would come in. Nuts. Yeah,
there's depths to these stories. There's depths to this. But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, look, we know you got to go, and time is of the essence here. But
great. Fantastic.
Thank you very, very much for taking the time.
For the invite. That's really been cool. And by the way, thank you guys for what you're doing for Paverart, because I think it's great that you for everybody out there, you guys took me for a nice tour today, and the business has really kind of moved on and moved up, and it's great that you guys are doing that. It's fantastic. It's something. I really do think it is something that's needed out there for customers, and I'm just glad to see you guys still kicking it.
Well, it's a big part of that's your legacy and Mick's legacy. So thank you for coming, and we really appreciate the time you took. And it's in good hands with Mark Alavito. Trust me.
Yeah.
Very, very, very good hands.
Great.